Welcome dear colleagues, welcome dear guests. My name is Sylvia van der Heijden and I'm General Director of the Nederlands Film Festival. My introduction will be in Dutch, unfortunately, but Nadia, who comes after me, will continue in English. Gisteravond openden we het Nederlands Filmfestival met de film Niemand in de Stad van Michiel van Erp, naar een boek van Philip Huff. De film gaat over het Amsterdam Studentenkorps en dendert vanaf de eerste minuut over je heen. Met een wereld van bier, seks en brallende mannen. Niet per se de wereld waarin ik me thuis voel. Maar toch, via al het zooien, brallen, afpilsen en wegtikken zag ik in de film van Michiel iets anders dan alleen maar ballerige studenten. Ik zag jongens op zoek naar zichzelf, hun positie in de wereld, hun relatie tot elkaar. Door hun verhaal over vriendschap werd ik de film ingezogen. Ik liep uiteindelijk ontroerd de film uit. Dat is precies waar het om gaat voor mij bij het Nederlands Filmfestival. De fenomenale kracht van verhalen vertellen. De kracht om mensen even uit hun stoel op te laten veren en in een andere wereld te doen verdwijnen. Wij brengen die verhalen graag samen op het NFF. En natuurlijk niet alleen de verhalen. De komende dagen is het NFF de plek waar de hele sector samenkomt. En jullie elkaar ontmoeten. Ons doel met deze NFF Professionals-dagen is de kwaliteit, zichtbaarheid en toegankelijkheid van de Nederlandse producties te vergroten. Van groot belang in een sector die zo versnipperd is. Juist nu de Nederlandse markt gedomineerd wordt door de buitenlandse concurrentie, moeten we onze krachten bundelen. En samen een sterk Nederlands product neerzetten en profileren. Het NFF wil daar platform voor zijn. En dat kunnen we alleen samen met de hele sector. Ik nodig jullie daarom van harte uit om tijdens ons vernieuwde professionals-programma in debat te treden, elkaar te inspireren en samen naar oplossingen te zoeken. Vandaag doen we dat in onze conferentie en tijdens de verschillende paneldiscussies. Gedurende het jaar doen we dat in NFF Extended, bijeenkomsten die we samen met AI, DAF en de verschillende vakverenigingen organiseren voor en met de sector. Terug naar vandaag. Uitgangspunt voor de conferentie vanochtend zijn het rapport van de Raad voor Cultuur Zicht op zoveel meer en de reactie van de minister daarop. Voordat ik het stokje doorgeef aan Nadia Moussaid, wil ik graag onze sponsoren, het ministerie, de provincie en gemeente Utrecht en alle fondsen bedanken voor hun geweldige ondersteuning. Ik wens u voor de komende dagen heel veel plezier, goede gesprekken en inspiratie toe.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm going to switch to English from now on because we also have international guests in the audience and also the guests who are going to take part in the panel. My name is Nadia Moussaid. I also work for the Dutch television. I first have a short introduction for you. The numbers don't lie. Sylvia also just said it. The audiovisual sector is changing rapidly, and as well as the funding of this sector. And as a result, the visibility of Dutch AV productions is under pressure. I'm sure this is not new information for you all. Investments by traditional parties are declining, and at the same time, a growing part of the profits from exploitation are being made by only a few big international players, such as Netflix, Amazon, or YouTube. Because of this rapid growing offer of media, the way we consume it is changing. If I look at myself, I don't sit behind a television anymore, and I don't even have a television. I'm almost ashamed to admit this. I work for Dutch TV for quite a few years, but I haven't had a television for 6 years. But I do watch it, but on my laptop. When I want it, at the moment, I decide to watch it. And if it's really necessary, I stream it. Or I watch it on my iPhone. And I think this is very familiar for you all. But this, of course, changes the whole industry. And as a result, the audience becomes more demanding in regard to the quality of the productions, of films, of series, of documentaries, of all sorts of creative media productions. A huge challenge for all of us, and we're going to talk about this today. Sylvia also mentioned the report of the Council for Culture. they wrote a report with advice and recommendations, and our Dutch ministers replied. They're going to research some recommendations further, such as the quota, levies and taxes. And the results of this research will be published at the end of the year. But we are also going to discuss it today in the panel. This whole report of the Council for Culture is an important guidance of this whole conference. And we will talk about the chances and opportunities to improve domestic productions. I will introduce the first panelists. Doreen Boonekamp, Director of the Netherlands Filmfonds. Please come to the stage. Let's give her an applause. Yeah, please take a seat, Doreen. Is my mic on? Yes. Our second guest is Erwin Provoost. He's the Director of the Flemish Audiovisueel Fund. And I have a bit of bad news today, because Netflix was also supposed to take part in this panel, but unfortunately, Janneke Sloetjes, the Director of European Public Policy, is sick. She's very sorry. We just found out this morning she's too ill to be here, and yeah, she apologizes. I'm sorry. But we do have a lot of other important, interesting international guests, such as Alexandra Lebret. She's Director of European Producers Club and a producer herself. Let's give her a big applause. Yeah, take a seat. Good. Do you want to sit here, Alexandra? So I can... should I drop my microphone there or leave it here? I'll just leave it here. Okay. Yes, let's start. Erwin, you're from Belgium. Mm-hmm. I believe you have a similar position as Doreen in Belgium. What, according to you, is the biggest challenge we're facing at the moment if we talk about AV productions? It's a big question. Let's do it short, and then we're going to elaborate.
Well, you mentioned it already. It's with all the tsunami of foreign product coming to each country in Europe, is how are we going to find an answer with our proper production, where the competition at least is not equal. So I think that if we want to know in the future who we are and where we stand for in each country, we have to severely augment our proper production, and maybe in quality, but also in volume. And I think that's the challenge we're facing with the budgets we are confronted with. This is not possible for the moment. So that's going to be a huge discussion with the authorities, and make them aware of the fact that or we grow or we die.
We grow or we die. Well, I hope we have some good advice at the end of this panel discussion. Doreen, do you agree with what Erwin says? Are these the biggest challenges?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and it's really about staying with your domestic productions relevant to the audiences, and not only within your own country, but also across borders. And when you look at in Europe, what we are really facing is how do you keep an independent industry, film industry, audiovisual industry alive, and how do you keep on the creation to move on to a higher level and to circulate.
And could you maybe, I think the audience knows, but could you shortly explain us what your position is as director? What is your responsibility?
What we both do is we are both responsible for the national funds in our countries, in Belgium, Flanders, and in the Netherlands. So what we do is stimulate the development, production, and distribution of films, from shorts to features, animated films, and documentaries, of course, and innovative productions. When we look at innovative productions, we both have a challenge because much more has to be done on that side as well. So it's we have to actually really work on all levels, and apart from really supporting production, we also support talent development through training for professionals, festivals, and so on.
But we could say that you, in the Netherlands, you're the most important fund.
It's not very difficult to be important when you're on your own. But
well, is that the same situation in Belgium?
Yes,
or should I say Flanders? Belgium.
Well, let's keep it to Flanders. But the French part is very similar. Yes, indeed, it's approximately the same. We have 3 funds: a film fund, documentary animation, and so for the single screen productions. Have a media fund for television, documentary animation, and fiction. And then we also have a game fund, and which is growing also. Next to that, film festivals are under the VAF umbrella, and we are working also with cinemas together for exploitation, because don't forget, we're talking a lot in Europe about production, but exploitation or seeing our production is another serious problem.
Yeah. Alexandra, could you explain, because you're a producer, but you're also the director of the European Producers Club. What do you do?
The European Producers Club is an organization that gathers 100 producers, more than that, coming from 28 countries. So I'm speaking a lot of languages first, producing TV and feature films. We are trying to build a strong industry by, and for that, we are trying to think about the future of the model and to adapt ourselves. A producer has to be pragmatic. And to come back to your questions about the challenge, you're right. The arrival of the digital has changed many things in the way the audience is watching film. And it has consequences. The first consequences for me is on the fact that there is a liberation of the 19-minute constraints. You can, there is the appeal for TV series, but also for short, is for me is linked to that as well. There is that limit that was imposed by the exhibitors to have 90 minutes because they needed a space for advertising. And the second consequences I would like to underline, because you didn't, is the fact that we discovered that our film can be successful in the rest of the world.
Sorry, say it again?
Our film can be, yes, I can say it again, Our film can be successful outside of the world. Downton Abbey is a huge success in China. Could you imagine that?
No.
That's such a British story. And making a lot of money there. So there is a potentiality outside Europe, or inside Europe even, for our film. This links to change of the business models, of course, that we can discuss further, with the decrease of the market money and the arrival of that new players. But what we should keep in mind is that the online rights of our films have a value. They have a value, and we need to find a way to keep them and to give a value out of it. And for us, as producer, is a real challenge, and this is also linked to the fact that we want to stay independent and work owning our rights and working on the subject we decide. Yeah. The second challenge I would like to address very shortly is about the audience of the film in theaters. We don't have to lose them. We need to keep them in theaters. I was in Locarno this summer. Locarno is 7,000 people in the same place watching a Malaysian film, that is very arty, and that's fantastic. And why we don't have these people in the theaters usually? Because the theaters are not playing the game. The exhibitors are not playing the game, and we should think about something there. And third challenge for me is, of course, I'm a woman, is the fact that we include more women. I would like to celebrate the French system that just put in place.
I'm the only man here.
That just put in place an incentive for women directing, putting a bonus of support that is given for women, but not only for women, but also for cultural minority person and all the people that are outside the society.
Okay, so this is the outline. Let's get started. First of all, unfortunately Netflix is not here, but we can discuss this. Players like Netflix, Apple, Amazon, they are massively expanding their user base in Europe. And they also continue to grow their position, their power grows, and their influence. How can we improve our ways of working together? I want to start with you, Alexandra, because you explained me that you've had talks with Netflix years ago already.
Years ago, yes, and you know, they are the new players, they are our new clients, and we know that the conditions they are proposing are not the best one, but it's not by fighting against them that we will succeed in having something.
So how could it be improved?
So we started our discussion on the political level, because we are also representing the producers inside the European Commission, so for all the regulation matters, and we have a lot to discuss together. And it has been always, Netflix replied very well to that invitation to talk, and they are the first one. And as I told you, they are the first one taking part to that kind of panel. They are the first one to face and to discuss with the professional, with the institution. We never see Google, Amazon, or Amazon. They are coming, but Google and Apple, I try to catch them, and I never succeed. So first, congratulations to Netflix, because they agree to take part to that dialogue. We are discussing with them many issues, ranging from the AVMS directive obligation of investment, obligation of exhibition of content, European content, to agreements that we do not agree with.
On European level?
Yes, at European level. We are European.
Of course. Doreen, how do you think we can improve our ways of working together with these big international players?
Well, like Alexandra says, you really have to get into a dialogue and see how we can all be part of one ecosystem. That's actually basically what we are talking about. And in the end, manage to create value within the whole value chain. Like Alexandra says, I do fully agree that Netflix is one of the companies that is really very much into dialogue on all levels. And you see already steps, like, for example, the way they now behave in the festival scene by putting festivals on screen. So they are sort of seeing how they can move towards us, and we have to see how we can collaborate with them.
Do they need us?
Of course. In money-wise, of course not. But these companies all exist through content, so the content should get a much bigger value. It has value, but the value is not on the side of the creators. Okay,
so you're both saying it's good. Netflix opens the dialogue. It's good. They participating in festivals, but what should be done, Erwin? What do you think?
Well, on our side, what should be done is first, I think we cannot improve the relation with Netflix. We have to start the relation with Netflix. We're not that far yet. I had the pleasure to meet the new head of Netflix of Scandinavia and Benelux yesterday in Oslo. And she will come over to Belgium. We're going to start talking, and very practical. When do they want to come in? When can we synchronize what funds are doing? Because we are going a little bit slower than Netflix apparently wants to go once they invest in series or films. So that's the talkies we have to do together with the profession. We're going to do that in November. But Netflix, well, it's a beast who needs a lot of product, and we have to start with that. If they need a lot of product, I think there's some place for us, all of us, there to be found. Secondly, I read somewhere, I don't remember where, that Netflix predicts that within 5 years, 50% of the product will be non-English. So that's another opportunity, I think, that we have to be aware of. And then third, for any player who's coming to our countries and find clients there, I think there should be a fair share for the local market. And that's what we're working on also, apparently.
Is it a fair share at the moment?
No. Not yet, because there is not a share yet. So, but for example, in Flanders, there's going to be a ministry, how you say it, decree, law, to take it easy, that they have to invest in Flemish production. So
there's going to be a law implemented in
yes,
in
and
Flanders.
That's for the coming weeks, normally.
The coming weeks, there's going to be a law that Netflix
has to invest in Flemish production.
How much?
I won't say. No. It's a percentage of the turnover. which I think is the good way to do, but it's to the minister to declare all
Alexandra?
That's a good thing from the European Commission. It's linked to a directive called the Audiovisual Media Services that impose the online platform to take part, that allows member states to tax the online platform to finance the local content. In Italy, a law that had just been set up for 20% of the turnover to be invested into European national content.
So this is happening now in more European countries.
Yes, this is a strange thing because you could imagine that it's coming from Europe and the whole of Europe is saying the same thing and the same percentages and so on. So apparently that's not the case. You have the countries who are all in a different way talking to Netflix or imposing rules. And apparently afterwards the Commission would level all the different percentages and so on. So that's apparently the way they would like to do it.
How does this work in France?
There's an obligation, of course, of different kinds. It's a very sophisticated. There is first a tax that is like in Germany, that is taken on the turnover on both television. It's 5% more or less of their turnover, and then on new platforms that are established outside France, but addressing the French market. Of 2% of their turnover. This is represents around 500 million euros. That goes to the CNC, to the national support system, and then is redistributed into the whole industry, not only production, but also on distribution, also everywhere. And there are direct obligation of its investment that are linked again to the turnover. That goes from 15% to 26%, depending on the type of film you are releasing. If they are new, it's 26%. If it's more a catalog film, it's 15%, and of which there is a huge proportion for French film. When it's an obligation of 15%, then it's 12% for French film. When it's
I don't think anybody can remember this. but
it's so complicated. I tried all night to say, how can I say that in a simple way?
Basically, there's different percentages for a video on demand platform. There's a different percentage for a theater. You look at, right?
No.
Oh.
That's not what I said. There's a percentage of obligation of investment for television and online platforms.
Okay.
The range depends on the film they are presenting, if the films are new or not.
Wow. That's a hard job.
It is.
Who is deciding the percent? What? Maybe it goes too far. But Erwin, you wanted to reply. Yeah.
Yes, I guess we all know that the French system, in fact, is fantastic, and we all would dream of a French system. All our problems would be, almost all our problems would be solved. Not all, but there's an important thing there, because if I'm saying grow or die, and I have to look at our ministry to say, oh, we need more money for the industry. In France, it's a little bit different. It's the industry who's paying for the industry. You see, and that's the big difference with most of the European systems. That in France, the Centre National du Cinéma, in fact, they don't have money to spend. They get the money from different sources, and then they spend it. And it's a big difference where we are funded completely as a fund by the government. There's no cinemas, no obligation towards television. They invest in movies and series, but there are no obligations. And that's a big, big difference with France, where I can imagine Canal Plus in the beginning was not very happy that they had to invest a lot of money in production, but they're used to it and they do it, and the open-air broadcasters does it also.
There are some tensions these days with Canal Plus investment, but
I can imagine.
You're right. The budget of the CNC is 800 million. You asked me, so I revised all the figures, and of which is a tax on television that is financing Hall, and another tax on tickets. So it's all private money in a way.
Exactly.
And so it doesn't cost anything to the state.
Wow.
No, because that's a tradition. You can also more easily expand to new players, maybe. And for most other European countries, in some there are already levy systems in place, because a levy system is the system where you really get the money from the industry players and keep it in the industry. And
is this something you would like in the Netherlands?
A levy system?
Yeah.
I think it would be a good solution to have the combination of the text-based financing that we get the funding through the government in combination with a levy-based system. This is what actually now the researchers are all about, and what other countries are doing as well.
Yeah.
And it's not only about Netflix, it is about the whole value chain, because you have to keep it, the whole has to be healthy. It's not just one player.
Yeah, and it's not healthy at the moment.
No.
In terms of rights, let's talk about Netflix. They have this exclusivity deals. Is there a way we can rethink these models so that films and series are still allowed to travel? What do you think, Doreen?
Well, if you ask for total exclusivity, you have also to pay for all the production budget. This is basically what it is about. So when they have their originals, which they pay for all the way through, it's up to them. I think it is when you really want to put talent on stage and make them excel in between all this huge offer that you can look at. I think it's still important that you have more platforms than only a digital platform to watch it on. But the big challenge is, how do we operate with the acquisitions, where they acquire rights but haven't paid for the whole budget, whereas within the budget, because the whole system is based on pre-investments for the production budget, which have to be earned back through the value chain. So when it is stopped by only the offer that Netflix makes to pay for the rights, that's it, because you can't sell the film anymore.
Yeah. So this should be this should be opened. This should be changed, basically. Alexandra?
Yes, we are very imaginative, and so we tried many things. One kind of deal that worked until very little was what we called a donut deal.
Turnit deal?
Donut, you know, that cake.
Donut.
Yes.
Oh, donut.
Sorry, French.
No, sorry.
The center was your own country, so you keep your own country, and they take the rest of the world. And we were, quite happy with that. But it was until the success of the Casa de Papel, which broke everything, and now they don't want to hear about donut deals. So we are trying to find other ways. And for instance, we are using the fact that many tax incentives that we can use to produce films needs to have local producers and to have rights, and this helps us a lot. This is a real levy to negotiate with them.
It's true, because it's like you say, also the platforms make use of all the incentives that are around. And this puts an independent producer in a position to keep some rights to also stay independent.
Yeah. And Erwin, what do you think of these deals Netflix makes? I've seen it happening also, that documentary filmmakers are very happy they sold their movie to Netflix, but it's also like a double... They make a lot of money at once, but they know they can't show it anywhere else anymore.
It's not only a Netflix problem. It's a problem we know for years already, that there's only 100% to divide, and everybody wants to have 120%. And the producer is the last in line, so he's always screwed.
Or I would say the director. Sorry.
No, he shares part of the... Well, the ones who make the film. But we're talking a lot about rights. Actually, rights, but we should talk about revenues. And I think it's more about revenues than actually about rights. Because if somebody pays for the whole production, well, it's quite logical they own the rights, which doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a fair share for the makers of the content, as well series as films. And there is the whole difficult part that you see, that the producer and the creators, let's say, all these creative people together, are always the last in line. And very often it happens because 80% of the budget is financed. The last 20% you need, otherwise you won't make your movie or your series. And those last 20% cost a lot too, because you give almost everything away just to be able to make it.
Yeah.
And that's the big discussion. And it's not only a Netflix discussion, it's also a discussion with broadcasters, with telcos, and so on.
It only has become more visible through the big international
If you make it very simple, in Flanders, and it's a bit schematic, but let's say the fund is up for 33% of the budget. The tax shelter that we have is another 33%, and then the other 33% is coming from broadcasters, is coming from distribution, and so on. As broadcasters have more and more problems these days, especially the commercial ones with the revenues going down, those last 33% is so hard to finance for producers that they get into trouble, or they have to let down the budget and so on. So it's really there that there is a problem, that the chain is not working anymore like it worked before, because everybody is getting into problems. So for sure the production is getting into problems.
Is this the same situation in Holland, Doreen?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, and all the discussions that we have now is how to divide a pie which is far too small.
Yeah.
And you have really to make the slice into a big pie that you can divide again.
But you're saying the solution is in the revenues. We have to find another way.
Well, not only in the revenues is in the whole discussion with Netflix taking over everything. As long as the creators are having a fair share for what they were doing, I think they can be happy, and they will invest in new production and so on. So it's one thing. But we're not sharing, or we're not talking about revenues these days. We're also talking about how are they going to get their budget together.
Yeah, yeah. Do you see the same in other countries, Alexandra?
Yes. What I see, I was convinced that there was a decrease of the broadcasters' investment, and actually I had a look, and it's not so certain in European countries. What is certain is a decrease of the MG of sales agent and distributor. This is about 30% less. So there's a lack of financing for sure. For me, there is two ways of thinking, how can we face that, and what solution we can put in place. The first one is to foster the co-productions, because when you do a co-production, you give the rights to your country partner to your partner, but you can share the rest. But there's a lot of obstacles today to do that. The second one, as I was mentioning at the beginning, is how can we keep the online rights and how we can give value to it. So far, as producers, we succeeded only to give value on a pre-financing model. But we don't have people that are selling as much as we are doing when the film is done. Because if someone was able to do that, we could go and see a bank, look, the value of my film is that on Netflix, on platform. Can you please cash flow it for me? And it will be simple to do it. But the end of that chain, we couldn't succeed to find any solution to it. I would be happy to think with you.
Do you have an idea?
Yeah.
Doreen, do you have an idea?
Well, it is totally not easy, because otherwise we would have found the solution already. Well, but there are several steps you have to take in between. For example, the transparency of data in the industry, to actually not talk about a blur, but really know what is the value. And
but isn't that impossible? Isn't that impossible?
It is
to
possible.
think in advance. This is the value. This is going to be the value of my documentary or my film.
That's what a distributor is doing.
It's his job.
Yeah.
But when he puts the MG, he estimates receipts, revenues. That's exactly the same. We need data, as we need to have our own algorithm. We need to build that together at European level to know, this is, we are going to have that sales on TVOD, on SVOD, and this is the value, and we need a funds that cash flow that. That is not Netflix, that is not Amazon, that is not Google.
But who is it?
There's a difference also between the larger countries like France, England, and so on. It's not an easy one, because there's certainly a value to our production, and we're not very good. We're too far from the consumer. That's basically it.
In Flanders, you're saying?
Everywhere. The producers are too far away from the consumers. That's the main problem. On the other hand, we have to say also, I'm teaching at university in Ghent, and a couple of years ago I was explaining about production and so on, and then a student asked, but if Belgian producers would try harder to sell their product, then you would make more revenues, and you would not discuss about the fund and so on, that the funding has to be more from the government. All that money is outside Belgium, and you have to work harder as a producer. So how you reply to that? So I had to think 2 minutes, and I gave an answer which maybe was not the best one, and I knew the question was coming back next year with the new students, and they asked me again how is this possible? Producers are not working harder on their films to sell them abroad. And I said, yeah, you're right, we're not working hard. I was a producer, by the way. I'm not working hard enough on my film, so let me ask you a question. And there were 70 students in the audience. I said, how many of you saw in the last 6 months an American film? And they all raised their hands. How many of you saw a French film in the last 6 months? That was already less. And I said, who saw a Finnish film or a Swedish film in the last 6 months? And it was like, what a stupid question is that? I said, well, then you know how they react abroad about Flemish films. If they're not known, it's very difficult to expose them and then have revenues from it.
But whose responsibility is this? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that they are known, the domestic films?
It's not only one person's responsibility.
No, because let me make it more specific. There is a quote system in France, right, Alexandra?
Yes.
How does this quote system work?
For television, you mean?
Yeah.
It's simple. 60% of the works that are shown broadcasted should be European, of which 40% French.
Yeah. So you have a quote system. We don't have this, and then. Doreen, do we have the same in Holland?
No. Well, there are, of course, agreements on a European level, which are also implemented in the Netherlands for the linear services for broadcasters, but on a very low level. And of course, in the AVMS, now a percentage of 30% is being put in, but. It's nice to have a percentage, but I think most platforms actually already live up to having this percentage in their catalogs. It's much more a challenge. How are these productions found? How do they become visible? And if you look at the way the public funding system works in Europe, and I think that we have challenges also to adapt. In this day and age, within the media program on a European level and on a national level, how we can actually move also money from only fueling into production to not only fueling into production, but also in distribution and exhibition to have them. To have all these films become more visible, because why are we making them?
Visibility is
okay. But this visibility part, I first want to see if this quote system would work in other departments and in other countries. So. You have a quote system for television in France, but do you also have a quote system for Netflix, for example?
There is yes, obligations that are not very strong these days, but that are coming from with the AVMS directive. And I would like to speak about some experience that have been done in Belgium. They are ahead of what we called prominence measure.
Say it again.
Prominence measure, which are the way how you put you promote works inside the online platform. You can use a newsletter, you can use a front page, you can use it many ways. And for me, there's a nonsense to have 30% quotas in online life without prominence. Because, they can just have a European film at the end of the catalogue and no one will look at it, and so it doesn't have any sense, any effect on the industry. So we all need to think about what are the prominence measures that are efficient. So that meant the CSA, the Belgium CSA, tried many things, and it tried first to have a corner of European films, and it was a disaster.
Why?
Because European film is not a trademark. We have to be inside the offer. We should not be separated from the rest. But what we decided to promote as a European Producers Club, after thinking, is to have at least 30% of the film. When it comes to a search tool, you are looking for a thriller. In the result of your research, you should have 30% of European films, which are the quotas. When you are asking, we need to use algorithm. We need to use their tools in order to promote our films. Having a front page is not enough. We need to be not identify as European, but identify as the other films. We don't want to be ghettoized.
And do you agree this is a good idea?
Yes.
And is this happening anywhere at the moment?
France.
Netflix. I had a meeting at the European Commission with Netflix and the DG Connect, and I proposed that idea, and the European Commission was very in favor, was surprised. Oh, that's a good idea, we'll do it. And Netflix, we cannot, we are changing the taste of the audience, we cannot move on that. And so I think there will be a discussion, not a fight, but a discussion with them. But at the end of the day, they are having a lot of European content already. It's the way they are presenting it. So we need to discuss it. But it has been well received.
So should these discussions or these talks with VOD platforms, should they be done like individually by countries, or should this be done on a European level?
It's done both already at the moment. So the producers associations are doing it, the funding institutions are doing it, the film commissioners are doing it, and so it's on a European level, it's on an international level, and it's on a domestic level.
And how is it going?
Slowly, but we are moving forward.
Very diplomatic. But what could you do in this, Doreen?
Well, I think you will never manage to reach your goals when you just try to arrange everything within the Netherlands. So you have to collaborate with neighboring countries. You have to collaborate on a European level, because we also have to relate to the European law. That's so. The European law, which is now being designed, it's much more regulated actually than the law that we have in the Netherlands at the moment. So and this has to be implemented in all the countries. So by staying into discussion, but also making proposals, doing these researches, and start experimenting. So it's also not that you have to wait till we have the final solution. You really have to experiment with new models and see whether they work.
And what do you think of this, Erwin?
I agree. It's. I think that over the past years, Europe was, and we all were looking very much into production. And now you see in this discussion that marketing and putting our films in the awareness is getting very, very important, because that was the part that we forgot a little bit. We made the productions, but we forgot to tell that we made them.
But if we keep it to this quote system and also looking at the algorithms that Alexandra is talking, is this the big solution to improve the visibility of European productions, of domestic productions? Is this the solution, the key?
It's part of the.
I don't have any other one so far.
No, it's part
so
of
it
the
is.
solution. No, but
we had an example in Belgium. It's years ago. Much of the audience is too young to remember, probably. But there was a major exhibitor in Belgium who got into a big fight with the studios. And it turned out that in that discussion, the studios refused to give him any films anymore. And it was Antwerp,
I remember.
Very important city. So as he didn't get any American films anymore, he had to do something. So he went on the German market, and all those Flemish from that time know the Doctor from St. Pauli and all these soft erotic porno films, and everybody was watching German movies. So let's throw out all those American films, and everybody's going to watch Dutch films, Flemish films, French films.
Okay, so if we look at the theaters,
Yes, if you look at the theaters, let's have a look at the theaters. They have a responsibility they didn't assume. They don't assume at all. They are not taking part in the pre-financing process. Never. It's the distributors who are taking part on their behalf, and I would like to talk to you about to speak about an example that has been successful in South Korea. There were some quotas. 2/5 of the film screens were supposed to be Korean.
In the theaters.
In the theaters, it was, and it worked very well.
What's the consequence? What happens if you have a quota like this?
A strong national industry.
So a part of
because it's like in China. In China, when China Film is producing a film and releasing it, they take out all the other films. So there is a space. There's only one film in the 25,000 screens to be seen. So people like Chinese film, because they're going to see it. That's not the scale I'm talking about, of course. But we need to make some space because the exhibitors are not making some space. So we need to find ways, or we need to build another kind of theaters that are less market-driven, that are, less on their figures. Oh, there's no 20 seats, so let's take out the film.
So apart from a quote system on VOD platforms, you also would like to suggest a quote system for theaters?
I think there's a reflection to have about exhibition.
Yeah.
And we're coming late, of course, because for the moment our theaters are not in that good shape that they can afford to put more money aside for local production and so on. So it's a difficult one. If we would have done that 20 years ago, then nobody would have complained, and we would have another situation.
Doreen?
Yeah, again, it's not just putting a quota in, but then you have to find measures to make it also attractive to show, for example, Dutch films. So, like schemes that are available in France, that you they actually by every sold ticket, a distributor gets a certain amount back in the cinemas. You can have that as well for the exhibitors in the cinemas if a Dutch film is. So you have to create incentives to make it also attractive. You can't just say, okay, now 25% or 30% or whatever has to be Dutch film.
Because what could the consequence be if we implement this in Holland in the theaters?
There can be many consequences. It can be a great success, but it can also be that we have empty theaters. And
because if we look at the figures, I believe the cinema visits have gone up in Holland, but the sales for Dutch tickets, Dutch films have gone down, right?
Yeah, the market share of Dutch film is going down. Last year it was in absolute numbers of tickets a little bit higher than the year before, but still it's really low, and it should grow. So there needs to be done quite a lot to improve that. But it's not only by making space. You have to. This is what the whole discussion is about. There need to be incentives throughout the whole value chain.
And what could be one of these incentives?
Yeah.
In France, a distributor, when it's releasing European films, or French film, is having access to some funds. I will not explain because it's too complicated. But
a fund from the government.
The fund from the CNC. Not from the government. Again, it's a private money that is turning around. Yeah. And you have, I think, more or less €2 per ticket.
So this is what I meant, that you return something to make it attractive to screen a film, to distribute a film and to screen a film.
And as for the distribution, but maybe you want to, the promotion, maybe you want to speak later about that?
Yeah, exactly. But also, is this something that would work in Belgium and in France? Because the system is totally different in France. Could this work?
In this discussion, there are two parts. We're looking now at how can we make our films more visible, and how can we have that fair share of the cake. So of course, these are outsiders that we impose to say, hey, you have to play the game in a correct way. I think the industry has to look at itself also and say, do we provide those films that people want to see? That they
now you're
will
talking
come to
about the quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a two-part discussion. It's not only all these guys are bad and we are the good ones. I think that also we should look into ourselves and say, hey, how can we enlarge our audience? Do we have enough? Do we know enough about our audience and so on? And that's still going from the most difficult art house film to the most public film. But these are questions that the industry has to ask itself also.
And what is your answer if I would ask that question?
Well, that I think for Flanders that we're going to invest more in the beginning of the process, which means the development, the stories and so on.
So it's not good enough at the moment?
It can be better.
And in Holland, Doreen?
We did exactly this. So we moved quite a bit of budget over to invest much more in development, because it's such an important stage of making films, but it starts actually much earlier. If you're talking about quality, new talents, visibility, it's extremely important to have good film education and to start with the youngest viewers, to audiences, to educate them and to make them like films.
That's another idea, to change something in the education system. But would you say also there's something lacking in the quality of Dutch productions? Or it's just not good enough? That's why it's not visible?
It can be much better, but there are, of course, good films made. Otherwise, they wouldn't be selected for international festivals. They are curated and so on. So we shouldn't make ourselves totally depressed. But at the same time, you have to be aware that there are so many films around. You have to stand out. So yes, the quality should really improve.
How do people perceive Dutch, or how do people perceive domestic films? We have France, Belgium, and Holland. Let's start with France. Is the French audience very proud of their domestic production?
That's funny. There is two ways of seeing French film: from outside and from inside.
Exactly.
From outside, everyone is saying, the French cinema is so successful. That's fantastic. When you are French, you are not always very proud of what has been done and what is successful, actually. So that's why I will not go in your way, saying that we need every range of film, bad films and good films. We need to have the whole setup. That was my answer.
Yeah, so the French people can complain about their own productions, basically. If they do complain.
They do complain all the time.
Yeah. How do we... That's a French thing, eh? That's a cultural thing.
We are going on strike for, I don't know what. But,
and the Dutch?
We also complain all the time. What was it?
Well, how do people perceive? How does the audience perceive Dutch cinema?
When you look in the audience to the audience in the Netherlands, we have seen for some years that really the visibility of films is really done by the big audience films, not so much by the art house and documentary
the romantic
scene.
comedies.
Yes, what we've seen in the past years is that the attention for art house crossover documentary that really increased. So that was good news, but on the other hand, we have seen the other figures going down for the big audience films. So all in all, the audience doesn't really embrace Dutch film in the way they did it before. So, and of course, when we look back in the years before, it was usually 1, 2, 3 films which really performed outstanding, and the challenge is to have much more films to be outstanding and to really have a bigger audience. But of course, it's totally impossible to make only good films. There will always be films that fail and films that succeed, and that's part of the game.
Yeah. Are the Belgians proud?
Overall, I see a very steady market share for those Flemish films, so I think that's okay. In around the years 2000, when I was still producing, I had to compete with my films with another 250 films. And today it's like up to 450, 500 films that you have to compete with, and that's really a problem. So if you want to take our share or even go up a little bit in the share, that competition is harder. So that's what I mean also by if you see what's happening for the moment, the quality of our films can be raised. And of course, we all know in this business you're going to have successes and you're going to have failures. It's impossible. It would be too easy. And our difficulty is in Flanders that we support only 8 films a year.
Yeah.
So that's really very difficult. So if you have one who is very good, that year we'll have more market share. If we have 1 or 2 who are really bad,
8
then,
films a year.
That's not enough. It's,
and in Holland? Netherlands?
When it's...
Are you talking about fiction or...
Yeah, fiction. And I'm talking about the ones who are supported by the fund.
Okay.
So it's 12, 15 average.
Yeah, if I compare it only by the fund, it will be 2022, including the low-budget films. When I talk about features, including the feature-length films, but we also do, as a fund, support quite a large number of feature-length documentaries.
And is your idea to fund more films or less films with bigger budgets? What's a better idea?
That's it's a challenge because you need to have better funded projects. Otherwise, because the difficulties in the financing market. But on the other hand, you also need a production volume because you need to have the room to fail and to experiment and to make low budget and high budget. So that's a challenge. But as our budgets are, we chose, because our budget is really restricted after the budget cuts in 2013. Of course, we got in the cash rebate scheme, but it's a different scheme, and it's really looking into the international competition and having a higher production activity level in the Netherlands. It's not so much about the stimulating of different films. So we had to make the choice to raise the
budgets.
No, to raise the how do you say, the grants, and to reduce the number of films that we can support. So we did.
Less movies, less films, bigger budgets.
Bigger budgets,
and in Belgium?
Well, in Belgium there's a tendency, there were a couple of articles by colleagues who said we have to produce less films and bigger budgets and that we can compete. And you could say, oh yeah, well, maybe that's... but
solution.
It's an absurd discussion, because if you only produce 8 films a year, how can I lower the number of films that that we're going to make?
Oh, you can still make 6 then.
Yes, I can make 3 also. It's, but I think there's more. Even I would like to add on top of those 8 films, maybe 2 big budget films, bigger budget, because we're coming out of a small country. We're talking together about maybe putting money together so that at least we can make one bigger Belgian-Dutch film. So the discussion in Flanders about lowering the number of films is absurd.
So you don't, that's not your strategy?
No, I'll try to find more money rather than diminishing the number of films.
Okay, Alexandra?
Yes, this is all linked about... First, I would like to say that I will not complain because we produce 250 films a year in France, so I will not complain today.
You can lower.
I can complain because we release 800 films a year, so that's linked to, that brings me to the next point. There is an idea that we produce too many films. That's not correct. We produce too many, because the number of screens, the number of ways we are seeing films is increasing. We are more and more screens, more and more people watching film. So the problem is that we are facing is that we are distributing on the same way too many films. Not all the films that we produced are for going to theaters. I had an experience myself as a producer. I co-produced a Spanish thriller. I couldn't find an interesting distributor to release it. And so I went to an online release, a national one. And they did a campaign. They did I think it's my phone.
Oh, it's your phone.
So it will not stop. Can you stop it, please? So we did a campaign, and we released it nationally on multi-platform online, and I earned money. That's the first time I earned money with the revenues of one of my films. And this is an experiment I wanted to have also, because I'm managing the European Producers Club and I'm pushing my producers to be pragmatic. And it was fantastic. And so we need to be also innovative in terms of distribution, in terms of marketing as well, as producer at the beginning.
If we talk about the marketing, what could be improved? Doreen.
Now, if you look at how the way that we divide the budgets are divided, and you look into the way the American film is being released, we really put very little money aside for marketing and promotion, so that could be really improved.
Whose responsibility is this? Who decides this amount of? We have 100%. 5% is for marketing, and the rest goes to the production. Who decides these frameworks?
This is also again a game in the value chain. So it's a distributor putting out a film in the market, getting him to the different platforms, to the cinemas, etc. So they are in charge of the marketing and promotion, and they invest. But they, of course, invest after having seen the film. what do we think it's worth, what will come back, and that will all decide the amount that they can invest. And apart from that, there are funding schemes on a European level and also on national levels that fuel bits and pieces into the budget.
But for example, if I want to make a movie and I apply for funding with the Film Fund, is there a certain rule that this amount of the budget can be spent on marketing?
From the production budget, yes. Yeah.
How much is that?
It used to be 2.5%. It's now 5%. We are discussing about that, I have to say, because sometimes it depends on the film if 5% is a normal percentage or not. But that's only within the production budget. I'm also talking about the budget which is added up for the distribution, the P&A budget, because that's the much bigger budget.
We're going to help our producers a little bit in promotion marketing in a way that up till now the fund was only funding or helping producers when a film was going abroad, distribution, or festivals, for example, and so on. But then if you look at a Belgian art house film and, let's say, a comparable art house film, American art house film, put in the Belgian market, then you can say, okay, the Belgian one was going to get a P&A budget of 30,000 euros, and the American one is a budget of 125,000 euros, so which is completely unfair competition in a way that you cannot compete in that way. So what we can do out of the fund is redirecting our fund partially, that we're going to support the promotion of our films in the home market. I'm a strong believer that you have to start in your home market before you can go abroad. The film has to work in the home market. And then you can see that the materials from the APKs and the still photos and whatever, if we can help the producers there a bit with more money, so that at least all the promotion material is ready to be going wherever it needs and in a professional way. I think that's the first step that we can help the producers to make the beginning of the promotion a lot stronger. And
you're a producer, Alexandra. Is that an idea?
Yes, of course, it's an idea. The difference between the US studios and the European producers is that they are integrated companies. They are distributors. And we start the promotion with the distributor, which is very late, you know.
Yeah, and we want to have it from the shooting on.
As you said.
If you all agree on this, why is it organized this way?
These discussions are also going on because you see movements within the European industry that they are also getting more integrated on the one hand side. These kind of schemes, they are in place in quite a number of countries, but we have them already for many years. But then still we have a problem, so we have to see how we can improve on so many levels. And yes, indeed, if the majors already put an example that worked, the whole industry in Europe chose another direction. I think that has all to do with the cultural diversity, the linguistic diversity, and the independency. So it's just a totally different model. You can't compare it, and you can't easily go back.
But should there be more European collaboration then? Should that be improved?
That is really important, and you already see them really a lot teaming up. The funds are teaming up, the producers are teaming up. If you look in the Netherlands, some 8 years ago, I think 10% of the Dutch majority films were internationally co-produced. Now it's nearly 70%. So there is a lot of international collaborations. Otherwise, these films would not be made at all.
So this is also an answer: more collaboration on European level.
Yeah.
And more, how do you say? Sometimes the national support system cannot work together, and that's in particular the case for France, which is very protective for French language, French producer, French, and that makes it difficult to make co-production. So we need also you need also to have discussion, national funds, on how you can, make that possible.
Okay, I think this was the last question.
I think
you want to say something?
Well, no,
yeah.
just to add that I'm a strong believer in working together, but then let's say with comparable partners. If I'm going to France, I'm the poor nephew. If I talk to Doreen, well, we can manage to do something together. So that's also in Europe. You have the bigger countries. For example, we're talking about co-productions. We are talking about co-productions, the Netherlands and Flanders, which is quite normal. France, Germany and Italy are talking about co-productions together, so you see a level there. So it's not that easy to work out, but I'm a strong believer indeed that in the future we'll have to put funds together to come out with films that can compete.
And in the end, I think the industry can do a lot by themselves. Funding institutions can do a lot, but there's really a need for the national governments and for Europe to support the industry, to help to adapt to what is going on. Because if frameworks stay the way that they are now, we cannot find a solution. We can try to make things a little bit better. We will never find a solution.
And then you're asking two things: more budgets.
It's more budget, but also more regulation on certain levels. We have on many different levels. Problems from piracy on the one hand side to a lack of film education on the other side. So the whole thing has to be really dealt with. It's not just one single thing that will have the solution.
All right. The last one then.
My favorite lines, if we're talking about budgets and so on, and I'm talking with the government, the authorities, I'm giving the example of I produced a film in 1987 in Istanbul, and I got from the Ministry of Culture, at that time there was not a fund, it was Ministry of Culture, I got 400,000 euros for that film. In 2018, today, the fund gives maximum 650,000 euros. You don't have to be an economist to know, to realize that there's something wrong with the budgets that we are able to give to the producers and the makers. And that's a discussion we really have to. And of course, you always have the problem. Well, there they are again. They're asking for more money, the business, the industry, and so on. But we have to tackle that issue that those budgets were not raised at all.
Yeah. And then also maybe look at France and the way that they have a tax system and a quote system.
And a market.
And a market, yeah.
I'm happy to explain it in details if you want.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give them a big applause. Thank you.